greener economy. My name is Sarah Rose Taylor. I'm the Principal Researcher and Policy Analyst at the Framework Convention Alliance for Tobacco Control. You'll be the moderator of this session and one of the discussion group facilitators. We also have two other moderators joining us today. We have Claire Clément, who is the Policy Officer at the Smoke-Free Partnership. We also have Danielle van KALMTHOUT, the coordinator of the Belgian Alliance for a Smoke-Free Society. I would just like to start by providing a disclaimer before we begin. The tobacco industry and those representing tobacco industry interests are not invited to this session in accordance with Article 5.3 on industry interference in the WHO's Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. Now let's begin. We'll start by inviting everyone to fill out a short poll using Slido to let us know just how much background knowledge you have about tobacco control. So if I could get the Slido information up shared on the screen, that would be great. Perfect. So you can connect to Slido either using the QR code, or you can go to slido.com and enter in the number you see on the screen. Just a very short poll so everyone get a sense of what kind of backgrounds, experience different participants have in this area. So let's vote now. Okay, we've got a few responses rolling in. Everyone could vote quickly, then we can just kind of get a sense. We have some folks who are quite familiar, some who are somewhat familiar, but it seems like everyone so far has at least some kind of background knowledge about tobacco control, which is great. It means we'll have a range of experiences, so we'll be able to learn a lot from each other today and engage in some rich discussions. So our goal with today's discussions really is to come up with some ideas to promote global tobacco control and sustainable development simultaneously, with a focus on the environmental aspects of these interconnected topics. Before we begin the discussions, we're going to start with a brief overview of some key issues, just to give everyone some background information, get us all on the same page, and get us thinking before we divide up into our small groups. So I'm going to start, as you can see on the screen, with an introduction to the links between tobacco control, the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, or FCTC, and the SDGs. Next slide, please.
You should be able to share a slide.
There, at Access Now. Thank you. So we'll just start by talking about global tobacco control. Tobacco is extraordinarily dangerous for human health. Tobacco use kills almost 8 million people all around the world every year, and that's increasingly focused in low and middle income countries. It causes a variety of non-communicable diseases, including various cancers, and it creates a health burden not only felt by individuals, but also healthcare systems and economies. Driving the tobacco epidemic is a wealthy, powerful industry that is focused on attracting new consumers. So this is what interests the tobacco industry about low and middle income countries. Not only is there a large market of potential consumers for them to target, but also in many cases fewer protections and weaker tobacco control measures. To tackle this issue, we have the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, or FCTC. It's an evidence-based health treaty that contains a wide variety of proven measures to control tobacco. Some examples include taxation and smoke-free spaces. To date, 182 countries have ratified the FCTC, although implementation and enforcement is uneven. Now, global tobacco control is an important contributor to sustainable development because of how important it is to control and reduce the negative impacts of tobacco. It's included in the SDGs under the goal on health, but really it's relevant across all the goals. So for example, tobacco use increases poverty, diverting money away from basic necessities to purchase tobacco. This means less household money is available for things like nutritious food or for education. It also has a wide variety of environmental impacts, which we'll discuss today. So for example, tobacco consumption and production leads to deforestation and pollution and land degradation, among other things. This is why we feel it is so important to have more conversations between stakeholders in tobacco control, environmental protection, and sustainable development, because we can work together on so many common goals and simultaneously create opportunities for progress. To speak more about the environmental aspects of tobacco control, I would like to turn the mic over to Danielle.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I'm just also, going to the next slide. Yes. So the health effects of smoking and passive smoking are already widely recognized and very well documented. But the impact of the production and consumption of tobacco products on the environment is so much less and is also often overlooked. Although that the Framework Convention includes a specific article on the environmental concerns regarding tobacco. So for tobacco, you have 5 different stages, key stages, which can be roughly recognized. So here in the slide, so the first one is growing and curing, then the product manufacturing, the distribution, transportation, the product consumption, so including the second-hand and third-hand smoke, as well as the post-consumption tobacco product waste disposal, which is, for example, cigarette butts and the packaging of the tobacco packs. And just the next slide. So here you see, you have to start actually in the middle of the slide, so in a circle. And you see that each year there is 32.4 million tons of green tobacco leaf that is cultivated across 125 countries, which is manufactured in 500 factories, which is leading to a production of 6 trillion cigarettes each year. If you look at the left-hand side, you can see what additional pressure on the environment there is to produce these 6 trillion cigarette sticks, as it consumes a lot of water, enormous consumption of land and soil, so agricultural land, water, and also material that has to be used every year. Tobacco processing, so especially the drying, is very energy intensive because it's often wood or coal that is used for this purpose. So for example, it leads, and you can see that at the other end of the graphic, it leads to CO2 emissions. The total of the production per year of CO2 emissions is about 0.2 of the total produced greenhouse gas emissions in the world. But it also, of course, has wastewater and solid waste that comes out of this. And then I have a oh, sorry, I forgot the slide actually, but that's not a problem. I just would like to pass a very short word, because we were talking about that in the breakout rooms, is about the due diligence, because the tobacco industry actually ignores totally the environmental responsibility that it has, and we have seen very shortly what impact the tobacco industry has on the environmental pollution. And the environmental costs are especially borne by society, and especially in the low and middle income countries in particular. A presentation in the beginning of last year, Commissioner Reinders, he proposed that there will be a mandatory due diligence initiative that should come out actually soon. And the due diligence would require so the tobacco industry also to identify the risks and prevent human rights and environmental impact of the whole life cycle for the company and the partners within the supply chain of the production of the products. I think this is a very good initiative, so we will be waiting for, and we can discuss a bit later during this session. I think I will leave it to that. So then I would give the floor to Claire.
Thank you, Danielle. So hi everyone, I'm Claire. I've been working on the links between tobacco and environment for the last year, and I hope that together we can find some ideas and solutions. Just going to the next slide. So here you can find some tobacco leaves that you can still find growing in some places in Europe. It looks actually quite nice if you're looking at it like that. But if you look at the impact of tobacco products, I'm talking here mostly about cigarettes on the environment, then the story is really different. Cigarette butts are the most littered plastic item in the world, and they are plastic because lots of people ignore it. And they have been in the top of beach collection every year for the last 30 years. Cigarettes also contain more than 7,000 chemicals that might just leach into the environment, and it includes arsenic and lead and lots of others. And cigarette butts can take up to 12 years to decompose. And when I say decompose, it just breaks into small pieces of plastic. So this is just a small part of this burden. And also Danielle talked about it already. And I think I could continue like that for a long time. And I'm here only talking about tobacco product waste and not the whole supply chain, as Danielle already presented. And when we come to talk about money, this can represent quite a big amount of money. In the US, cities spend between $3 million and $16 million just on cigarette cleanup, and just a small part of the impact on the environment. So the question is a bit, sorry, I'm going to the next slide. So the question is, how can we offset those now that we have those cigarette butts, those plastic filters, those also plastic packages, and is there any way we can offset it, and how do we pay for that, and who should pay for that? And I'm giving back the floor to Sarah.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Claire and Danielle. So now that we've set the scene with some background information, gotten a bit more into the topic, we're going to move into some discussion. You know, the purpose of this session is brainstorming and coming up with some ideas. Because we're a smaller group today, we're all going to stay in the session together, which is great. And the focus of the discussion group, which is going to run for about the next 45 minutes, we're going to focus on promoting sustainable livelihoods and agricultural practices, which is certainly an important issue in tobacco control, as it is across all kinds of other issue areas, and again, interconnected with other sustainable development goals and priorities across different communities. So really, we're here for an open discussion on the topic. And I'm going to lead with a few guiding questions, but we're going to really focus on discussion. The more ideas we can generate, the better. So please don't be shy to jump in. This includes presenting new ideas, as well as ideas that build on what other participants are bringing up. So my colleague Nicoletta is going to operate a virtual whiteboard for us to gather all of our thoughts, and that's going to be running in the background, and she'll be able to share that with us at different intervals. So we do have the chat function available on the side, as some of you have already been using, but we would like to encourage you to unmute yourselves, use your microphone, and keep things moving in the discussion. But again, feel free to use the chat function if you prefer. We have, again, about 42 minutes for our discussion group. Then we'll do a bit of a wrap up. But for now, we can kind of get started. I'd like to start pretty simply so we can all get to know each other a little bit, introduce ourselves. We will go around with our name, the organization you work with, and one keyword that you got from the presentations this morning. Either one to describe the presentation or just a keyword that really stuck out to you. So for example, my name is Sarah. I'm from the Framework Convention Alliance for Tobacco Control, And one key word for me is interconnected. Maybe if we want to start with Danielle and Claire, our other moderators, and then we can go from there.
Okay, then I'm gonna follow. Hi everyone, I'm Claire. I'm from the Smoke-Free Partnership Tobacco Organization based in Brussels. And if I have to select one word of what has been presented, I would say the Sustainable Development Goals, which is 3.
Hello, everyone. My name is Danielle. I'm working at the Belgian Alliance for Smoke-Free Society, and I'm also a PhD researcher at University of Ghent on human rights. And one of the words was, also preparing the presentation is the incredible impact, environmental impact of the tobacco production and consumption.
If I could get some other colleagues from the Smoke-Free Partnership to introduce themselves.
Hi, this is Irina. I'm also from the Smoke-Free Partnership. I'm a legal and policy officer, and my keyword is image.
Hi, my name is Anka Toma. I am also from the Smoke-Free Partnership, and my keyword, well, it's 3 keywords, tobacco-free society.
Maybe I go next. My name is Nicoletta Arnodova. I'm Senior Policy and Communications Officer at Smoke-Free Partnership. And I think the keyword for this particular session, well, it's more of a sentence, but no healthy people without a healthy planet.
Great. I also have a few colleagues of mine from the Framework Convention Alliance, if you all wouldn't mind introducing yourselves. And if anyone's comfortable turning on your camera, that would be great as well, just to encourage discussion. But if not, no pressure.
I can introduce myself. I'm Ryan Forrest. I'm from the Framework Convention Alliance, and I'm based in Ottawa. I think one word maybe that occurs to me after watching the presentations is the word intersectoral, and the need to maybe kind of facilitate some intersectoral collaboration in terms of thinking about how we tackle the environmental impacts of tobacco throughout its life cycle.
Hello, I'm Persa Dimitsaki. I'm a trainee in Smoke-Free Partnership, and I'm sharing the same word that Claire before said. It's SDG.
I'll go next. I didn't turn my camera. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Ella. Ella, go ahead.
All right. I'm Ella. I'm an intern with Framework Convention Alliance, and I think that my word that stuck out to me was tobacco's global footprint regarding its environmental impact.
All right, I will go next. I chose my laptop to use today that doesn't have its camera working, so I am Leslie from the Framework Convention Alliance as well. Nice to see everybody. A word I would say is maybe money or economy. So the impact that that tobacco control has on the economy.
My name is Martina. I'm from Ash, Ireland, and I'm the word that I got from it was just cost. I'm interested in. I thought that was really interesting about the cost to cities of cleaning up, and how we could redirect that money at promoting not smoking.
Great. I think we got everyone. I thought I saw Jeff Drope, but he seems to have dropped off, but maybe when he comes back, we can bring him in. So again, we're going to be thinking today a bit about promoting sustainable livelihoods, sustainable agricultural practices. So just to start with something fairly basic, get thinking, what does it mean for livelihoods or for agricultural practices to be sustainable? And since we are a pretty small group, feel free to jump in. If you'd rather raise your hand, you can go for it, but let's have this like a good conversation and get some ideas going. And again, we'll have our visual whiteboard in the background or on screen. So yeah, let's kick it off. What does it mean for livelihoods or agricultural practices to be sustainable? Claire, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, so for me, the first idea that I have in mind is something like it ensure enough money for people who have the crops to have a decent life with that.
Absolutely.
I would add.
So I don't really understand the question. Sorry, I don't really understand the question. Are you asking about the sustainable livelihoods of people in general or of tobacco farmers?
General, just super broad.
Okay.
Initially, this session, we were attracting kind of anyone from different backgrounds. It seems like we're a very tobacco-focused group right now, which is fine. So whichever you prefer.
Yeah,
Anka,
for me, it would
you
be
want
to have. Oh, sorry.
No, Danielle, go ahead.
No, to have, yeah, to help tobacco farmers to cultivate another crop, no, instead of tobacco. So to have alternative ways of cultivation.
If I may, I would sort of take Danielle's point a little bit further, and it's about sustainability is one about farmers having options. It's also about the it's about something that rather contributes rather than harms the land and the area around it. So it's about the impact on the environment. It's about the impact on the regional development, and it's about the what Claire said about the livelihoods of people.
Does anything else spring to anyone's mind, either again in tobacco production or farming specifically, or just in general? What's a sustainable livelihood look like? What do sustainable agricultural practices look like? How does it affect the economy? How does it affect individuals? How does it affect the environment?
I think it was already a bit said by Anka, but I would say some like it also have to be like some crop that does not exhaust the soil and take all the water around and all those things. But I think it was a bit already implied.
It's also about the long term, right? I mean, the whole thing about sustainability is that soil, like the land that's used for any agricultural practice, should still be able to be used for agriculture in 50 years, rather than sort of be depleted in just a few crops or be completely dependent on intensive fertilizing. And biodiversity, and I mean, sustainability has so many facets, right? And agriculture and biodiversity have always been a little bit at odds, especially when it comes to intensive agriculture.
Maybe I would add to the discussion a point just about maybe like economic profitability, which I don't know, I think maybe somebody mentioned it, but I think one of the things that has been mentioned a fair bit to me when I've learned in the past about kind of tobacco growing, the experience of farmers is that they're often very indebted and they're kind of trapped in this cycle of debt. So I think, you know, sustainable agriculture is one that creates kind of sustainable profits for farmers, and not debt.
You know, I think that's a really good point as well. I wonder, sustainable livelihoods are ones that a crop that has all the benefits of tobacco but isn't tobacco. What are the benefits of growing tobacco? It's just it's not that profitable, is it? So anyway,
Yeah.
a similar crop that doesn't kill everybody on the planet.
I think that what also I feel make it easy for tobacco is like when like it's like not make it easy, but like they are going to farmers and explain them how they're gonna make the life with tobacco and everything. So they're like advertising their crops. I feel. Maybe I'm wrong.
Mhm. I'm not very into agriculture or tobacco cultivation, but is it very intensive? And that's why there's also a lot of child labor in tobacco cultivation.
So I think the point there would be, you know, sustainable means, you know, not using child labor. A sustainable practice means, you know, using labor in a sustainable way. So if someone isn't working, you know, 100 hours a week, someone isn't working when they are a child and should be in school, these kinds of things where it's, yeah, a more ethical use of labor practices.
But there are also crops, you know, you don't get sick because you have this nicotine poisoning that you have when you work in with tobacco leaves.
We've got a good sense of some of the dimensions of, you know, sustainable livelihoods and sustainable agricultural practices, and certainly it's the opposite of what we're seeing in tobacco control. It's in tobacco production, there's much more, you know, child labor and not using ethical sources of labor. It's taking all of the nutrients out of the soil. It's causing deforestation and all these issues. So it's really the opposite of a sustainable approach to agriculture or a sustainable approach to someone's livelihood. So based on your work, your experiences, what you've been reading about, in particular in tobacco, I suppose, what are some examples of sustainable livelihoods and sustainable approaches to labor and agriculture? So what are some programs that you've seen that have helped switch people out of tobacco production, and what kind of makes them good examples that we can think about? So just to, I guess, get the ball rolling, there's one example I've read about from Brazil in 2005. The government started a national program for diversification of tobacco growing areas. So this was launched to support farming families that were dependent on tobacco production and had been for quite a long time. So this program, a big part of it was training and technical assistance to equip farmers with the knowledge and the tools they needed in order to switch to entirely different farming methods that they weren't used to doing. And so the transition often was gradual, but over time, a lot of farmers moved away from tobacco production. And what's really cool to me about this program was they didn't have any kind of mandate where you had to completely abandon tobacco. They just wanted you to diversify. But a lot of farmers ended up completely abandoning tobacco production for a combination of health reasons, environmental reasons, economic reasons. So once they had the tools to leave, a lot wanted to just leave entirely. So I think knowledge and training can be an important component of helping people get out of this. And it goes back to what Ryan was saying, where people are trapped in debt and trapped in tobacco production.
And why do people stay trapped in tobacco cultivation? What are the main barriers for them to switch to more sustainable crop growing and other nutritious things instead of crops that kill you?
I think from my understanding, it's oftentimes a lack of capital to be able to make the transition to something alternative. And I know that one of the other initiatives that I've heard of is that the UNDP is providing social impact bonds to some countries. I think in Zambia, that approach is being piloted to provide capital to facilitate this switch to producing or to growing alternative crops, which are more profitable than tobacco. But I unfortunately don't know if there's any sort of, I don't know what those crops are or whether there's any kind of demonstrated results or evaluation from that project as of yet.
And I also think like outside of I think like the money aspect, like the investment, the first investment is the first one, of course, but something to take also into consideration, sorry, is that tobacco cultivation, like, because it's an intensive culture and also because tobacco requires a lot of, I'm not sure what the inputs, I think, like chemicals and things like that. It really exhausted the soil. So you cannot grow everything after having tobacco growing for years on the ground. So you have to have particular crops so that you're sure that they can grow.
So
I see
to
also in the chat.
refeed that or to re-enrich the soil to allow other crops, that actually brings back the capital issue. It's costly to repair the land after tobacco. So the options are very limited, and they're not always available in the climate, in the same climate, and so it's this vicious circle of impoverishment, really, because then the farmers remain dependent on often GMO, often sort of short-term tobacco crops. So the next year they can only grow tobacco again. So they're indentured to the tobacco companies for providing the seed and the fertilizers and whatever.
Can I ask a question? Because because I'm totally new in this aspect. Is tobacco then so different of other crops that are grown? I mean, monoculture is something that is done in a lot of countries. Fertilizers and chemicals is a lot is used for many crops. I'm just wondering, is tobacco worse than other crops? So to make the change, or is it? Does anybody know that?
I think I'm not sure of what I'm saying, but I think tobacco has a particular tendency to really impoverish the soil. It really takes a lot of. It's a plant that asks for a lot of.
So more than other crops.
It's what I understood so far from what I read. I'm not sure, but it's what I understood so far. And if I can jump back on what Sarah said at the start, based on your work, what are some examples, blah, blah, blah. It's not example, but also in Europe, where, of course, we're a more developed place, so it's easier, but a big thing to end growing tobacco is the end of subsidies in favor of tobacco growing with the cap.
Yeah, and when we talk, as we are in the European Development Days, and we talk about development, I mean, a good help could be the microfinancing. No, then so microfinancing programs to, if that is a difficulty, so the capital, and to help people to transfer to another farming, then.
Any other final examples or ideas before we move to the next discussion question? We've already got a lot of good examples and good thoughts, especially, you know, connecting it to existing things like the Common Agricultural Policy is important, especially on EU Dev Days.
It's not exactly an example, but I guess also building on Danielle's previous idea, I guess that farming should, like sustainable farming should have to do with ensuring human food needs and basic needs, and not tobacco basically. And as a whole, I guess sustainable should also refer to improving the quality of life as a whole of the society and not just of the farmers.
Yeah, it's definitely a waste of the soil. Like you can do better use than tobacco.
Mm-hmm. And often tobacco production is in areas that are dealing with food scarcity and nutritional issues. So it's kind of compounding that issue. Again, you know, everything's so interconnected with this issue.
What I would add, excuse me, do you want to go ahead, Persephone?
Whatever you want, you can go on.
Okay. No, I was just thinking what Danielle asked earlier about whether this is a monoculture specific challenge, and I'm going to go back to that. I think the additional, the double, triple whammy that comes from this, the additional harm comes from the fact that it's a toxic culture to cultivate, and that it's linked to impoverishment, and that essentially the product doesn't feed anyone. Other than, you know, shareholders of major tobacco companies. So I think that's where the toxicity of this product in social and development terms also comes from.
Yeah. But the problem is it's still a legal product. So as long as it is,
Yes,
cigarettes
of
are a
course.
legal product, then the sources, the
Yeah,
resources
yeah, I
can be
know, but my
cultivated.
point,
Yeah,
my point is it's quite a different societal value to make cigarettes out of a
I
crop than
know.
to make
Of
bread out of
course.
it. So
Of course.
yeah. Mm.
Persephone, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I just wanted to add it that research has shown that food prices are going, due to climate change, are going to be higher and higher. And maybe it's one solution, changing the tobacco seeds with other products.
Sure. Okay. So we've got a lot of good ideas here. We have a pretty good sense of, you know, what sustainable agriculture and sustainable livelihoods look like, how tobacco is the opposite of that, some examples, either programs or in general, you know, what kind of things should look like to help producers move away from this, and certainly with quite a focus on farming. When we think about, you know, tobacco production being highly unsustainable, and, you know, we all know this, we've all been chatting about it. How can we think of arguments based on what we've discussed to convince different stakeholders to abandon tobacco production or encouraging abandoning tobacco production using sustainability as the core of the argument? So we can think of a bunch of different stakeholders. It could be, you know, individuals, it could be national institutions like governments, it could be international institutions, anyone that we can think of, but we certainly want to come away with this brainstorming session with some ideas, some ways to move forward. So what are some kind of key arguments we can use to encourage these stakeholders to move away from tobacco production or to regulate it more seriously, and using sustainability as the core of our arguments?
I think I'll go with another kind of easy argument for farmers, just money. Like if you want to, like how can I say that? Not just short-term money if you want like to have a sustainable crops on the longer term.
Yeah, and that would be, I think, in combination with what we've been talking about with these supports and programs that they can access to help them abandon it, you know, showing people the money, you know, going into further debt with tobacco production versus making money with other crops, combined with the, you know, the opportunities, the training and financing to do that. I think that's quite compelling.
Going off of that point with the money, I think that also if we encourage people to invest in more like green programs, you can see that that's a growing industry, whereas tobacco is literally like a dying industry because they're always losing customers if they don't get more people to be addicted to tobacco. So I think just like trying to get them to switch their mindset and invest in more things that are more sustainable will help.
I think that might be a useful argument, you know, chatting with national governments who, especially ones that might be quite influenced by the tobacco industry, framing it in that way might be a good way to attract that kind of stakeholder attention. I like the idea of, you know, a growing, you know, product versus a literal dying product. Ryan, did you want to jump in?
I was just going to share that, you know, we've been doing some work around trying to, with a few countries around kind of trying to increase investment in tobacco control and raise tobacco taxes. And through that and through various other work that we've done on kind of promoting tobacco control, one of the big kind of sources of opposition that consistently seems to come up is from non-health sectors of the government who really still see the profitability of tobacco growing and the benefits that it provides to the economy. So maybe kind of just, I would raise, I guess, the need to maybe address the non-sustainability and the actual kind of maybe some of the externalities of tobacco growing and tobacco use and all of that through its life cycle with non-health sectors of the government. I'm not exactly sure what the right framing or arguments would be there, but just to say that I think that my perception is that that's kind of a big obstacle to making progress more generally.
Yeah, we have,
Absolutely.
of course, in the European Union, there's this the external costs are going to be internalized with the extended producer responsibility scheme on the cigarette butts. So that's one part, but of course you can extend that to the whole life cycle of the product. Yeah. I was also thinking about last week. It was I forgot who it was, but they said there should be an additional tax raising from the companies, the multinationals that have the biggest annual turnover. Maybe it could also be asked. I'm not sure, maybe already the tobacco industry is part of that. If not, I think there are reasons enough to add them to it and to have a global tax for the external costs that they cause on environment and health.
Speaking about tax, I think like it has been enough proof that a tobacco company escaped some taxes, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So already if they were paying their tax.
And also building on the externalities argument, I guess another argument for countries that still give subsidies for this would be the complete loss of money because they give subsidies to tobacco farming, which in turn turns their people sick, which makes them lose money in the end. I don't know how accurate this is.
I'm not going to say an argument. I'm going to say something like one solution, my possible solution. Provide the farmers a network that they can distribute their products in in equal price and to have equal profit as they had before with the tobacco seeds. Because sometimes they don't have, they're not aware where to distribute the crops in same price, and the tobacco industry is there to take these seeds, so it's more easier.
And that might be an argument that could be made kind of in combination with the previous one. You know, if you combine, if governments want to provide subsidies, providing it to farmers looking to move out of tobacco and produce, you know, food crops, addressing any food scarcity issues, and then the subsidies go there, which could, you know, encourage farmers and help pay for farmers to be able to either get out of that debt or buy the new kinds of fertilizers or you know, farming tools in order to be able to switch to a new crop, or at the very least start diversifying. So there's kind of like a synergistic combination there, addressing a few stakeholders at once.
Another argument might be the due diligence initiative, because of, I mean, it will take still some years before it will it will be adopted and it will be implemented. But the tobacco companies, they will need to, they can be set liable. I mean, that's the idea. They can be set liable for the environmental harm and violation of human rights that they will cause.
This is a question on due diligence, since this is something I'm not overly familiar with. When companies are held liable, which actors hold the companies to account? How does that process work?
I mean, we are waiting for the proposal, so we don't know yet what the Commission will propose but the idea is also that citizens or groups of citizens will have a direct access to justice, so that it's not has to be through the whole national system, but that has a direct access. So that's what most NGOs promote. Of course, if this will be in the proposal, that's another thing. Yeah.
Okay.
So if you're directly you have damage, you can, you can, how do you say that? You can ask for the justice. Yeah.
Okay. So we've been thinking about arguments for farmers as stakeholders, national governments, certainly the international level came up in terms of global taxes, perhaps the due diligence initiatives with coalitions of folks. How about arguments aimed at stakeholders, basically other folks who are attending EU Dev Days, folks in the environmental protection world, folks in the sustainable development community? What are some arguments we can think of to convince them to, you know, have more conversations with us, work more closely with us, see how things are interconnected between our goals? Are there any additional arguments we could make aimed at those stakeholders to work together a little more closely?
I think we go like there are plenty of arguments so that we can work closely, but I think it's a bit further than tobacco growing, because like if you just take into consideration the impact of tobacco on air, soil, water pollution, and in Europe there is a lot of revision on the water, on legislation regarding water. So I think we have plenty of things to say when we know the impact on the water and biodiversity.
Mm-hmm.
I guess also as regards, sorry, you go on.
We start at the same time. I was also thinking that another aspect the extended producer responsibility type of actions is that they shouldn't necessarily, like, they shouldn't be passed on to consumers, because but anyway, the consumers already pay taxes, and taxes on tobacco products can be quite high in many places, especially in the sort of bigger consuming countries. And it's quite important that all these producer-related or supply chain-related costs, they don't necessarily get passed on to consumers, even though consumer awareness, I think it's a very tricky question to ask, because of course prices are such an important dissuasive tool on tobacco consumption, but at the same time, should really tobacco consumers pay for everything, including the sins of the industry?
But I think when you look at the sub-directive and we look at the implementation of the extended producer responsibility, it will be passed on to the smoker. So the person who buys the cigarettes, I mean, the industry will just calculate it in the price, in the price. I mean, that's done also in other waste streams. When you look at other waste streams where extended producer responsibility is applicable, it's the same thing. So
Yeah, and that's why the tobacco industry has profitability margins of 30% or 40%, and then it can afford to spend that extra because it also avoids taxes, right? We know that there's research on that, and then it spends that on corporate social responsibility schemes.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's why they didn't make too much noise. I mean, of course, they made noise about it, but it's not that they made it a fight of life and death, what they do with other issues, because they were just calculated in the price. Yeah.
It's very depressing.
It's a bit depressing, yeah, but well, you have less butts on the street. I mean, that's
yes.
So that's good.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that the point about offsetting the environmental the environmental externalities, I think there are some models for doing that, and they can have sort of positive outcomes in terms of the climate. I think the other thing that we don't yet have a mechanism for is the chemical pollution that is involved. So we have the plastic related initiatives, but the chemical pollution hasn't yet, at least to my knowledge, been accounted for by due diligence initiatives.
And then
Due diligence is for everything. It doesn't matter if it's chemical or whatever. So so I'm not sure if that if it's particular, but I don't know if you remember, and I'm still wondering what they are doing. It's this new lobby bureau of the tobacco industry, which is not working on tobacco control. No, it's working on REACH and WEEE and the electronic waste coming out of new products. And they are very silent. I mean, we just read the announcement in Politico, but they are there. So, and it was very interesting to see that they are working on the environmental areas and not at all on tobacco control and consumer issues, of course. Yeah.
So I think we've got a really good set of arguments aimed at a variety of different stakeholders. So to kind of wrap up the discussions and start thinking in terms of next steps and action items, let's talk about different strategies. What are some strategies that we can use, as tobacco control advocates, working with counterparts in sustainable development communities, or some strategies to advance these arguments that we've come up with. So that could be in terms of what are some appropriate forums to discuss this in, what are some ways to frame the arguments, how do we talk to these key stakeholders and get access to them, are there existing campaigns we can relate to, just overall, like how do we turn this into a bit more action in order to effectively promote sustainable livelihoods and agricultural practices as tobacco control community folks. And this could include anything our organizations are even, starting to do right now.
I was hoping there would be some development organizations in our session, so maybe no, because to have their point of view as well. So what you said in the beginning, it's interconnection. I think. Yeah. Try to interconnect. Because it's important to have their views and their insights and their experiences and what they feel about all the good arguments that we have come up with today.
Are there any other maybe particular events or campaigns that we could use that you think to try and have a little more interconnection other than, EU Dev Days 2022?
For me, what I'm aware of in terms of environmental organization working on those subjects is all those marine organizations, especially in the US with the Surf Rider, where they just launched a new campaign around cigarette butt pollution. And I also think that as community science is also very helpful in our work with pitch collection, where we see that cigarette butts is always on the top. But I do think like cleaning, like the organization that do clean up definitely have campaigns around that.
I think that we should really try to also within the tobacco control community to inform each other more and to take it up a step forward. For example, when talking about cigarette butts, of course, there we have interconnection with environmental NGOs because it's also a subject because of the plastics regulations and that there is an interconnection. But we should be, try to raise also awareness within our own community to I know that tobacco is a very huge area and it has a lot of aspects to think about, but also to give environment sustainability a more important, more priority.
Yeah, great point. Certainly hard for us to connect with others if, there aren't very many voices within tobacco control looking for these conversations.
For me, I guess it would be cross-sectorial research, and having this kind of multi-sectorial data would kind of help build bridges, as we currently do not have that much data when it comes to non-tobacco control issues, but involving tobacco elements.
I think for me, a big part of it is looking at events as opportunities. So not only, EU Dev Days, but there are lots of other big events going on in the sustainable development community, in, the environmental protection community. and finding ways to join those conversations. So, EU Dev Days is one, the annual high-level political forum on the Sustainable Development Goals is another opportunity. And I think it's both tobacco control folks stepping up and running events like this one, running various talks and being part of that, but also making sure that we are in the room where other discussions are happening. So I know, Claire, you said you went to a different brainstorming session that someone else ran earlier today. And so you're able to bring tobacco control examples and perspectives in these different conversations that it might not otherwise been thought of. So there's kind of the host role, but also the participant role, which I think in some cases might be overlooked as an important opportunity to start moving the discussions forward.
I do agree. I think we need to go more out and in different events and just mentioning tobacco as an issue. We need to raise awareness on that first. Yeah.
Agree.
I would like. Sorry, was someone speaking? I would like to add to marine protection marine protection. Also, I'm not really sure that it's overlooked, but the contribution of to climate change also, because the crops of tobacco product all these gas emissions and all this industry. I'm not really sure it's accounted. And I'm really sorry.
Don't be.
And also the Green Deal, it's linked really because the Green Deal, it's an umbrella that includes marine protection, agriculture, and climate change. And tobacco, it's an element in all these aspects.
Yeah, I'm coming back to due diligence, for example. That's also part of the sustainable governance over companies to get more sustainable. If you look at the sub-directive, it's part of the circular economy angle, together with the plastic strategy. And it's true, it has a lot of angles, the Green Deal is not a legal thing. It's a combination of existing initiatives and initiatives that come up, and it has to be. And the Green Deal is actually to implement the climate change goals of Paris and to implement the SDG goals. So, but it's absolutely true. There are a lot of angles there, and we are looking now at two. So at the sub-directive with the plastics and the circular economy, and then the due diligence, which is part of the sustainable governance for companies. But there are many more, I'm sure.
I think in Europe currently they have angles. It's just like we need energy. For me, like what I can see as opportunity is everything related to water pollution, because we have a lot of revision there, and also like chemicals, of course, with, including e-cigarette pollution.
Yeah. But water is different, huh? They have to, because we don't have the production, of course, of so it's only the it's the marine, no, it's the marine, and that's been tackled at sub. We don't have any production, or we have a few production plants, but I mean it's not. Most of them is in the developing world.
Yeah, like it's more like the final product when you talk about marine.
Yeah, but chemicals and new products, absolutely. The batteries, yeah.
And I think in thinking of all of these different, arguments and aspects, important to kind of follow the discussions that are going on with international bodies and treaties outside of the
Hmm.
FCT and the WHO. So what about, you know, the climate change discussions? I believe the 26th COP for the UNFCCC is this fall. So it'll be interesting for us interested in the environmental components of tobacco control, finding out what are they saying, what are their key agenda items, and different
Do you
initiatives that
work
they
on
want to
that?
push forward. Pardon
Are
me?
you working on that, Sarah?
I am not at the moment, but I think it's something for folks who are interested in it to keep in mind, and following along those other items on like analogous treaties and figuring out, oh, these are kind of points of connection, and understanding their priorities and how we can fit into there, beyond, you know, figuring out what priorities are on our end.
And is the
Discussions as well.
FCTC doing that, or the Secretariat of the FCTC? Do they have connections with like UNDP and the UNFCCC and all those international conventions and
I think they do
agencies?
talk. I think like they do talk with. I don't know if they talk with, but at least they share communication with the UNCCC. Yeah, FCCC.
Mm-hmm.
There's also the UN Interagency Task Force on NCDs. So there's some coordination that happens with other UN agencies. I can't remember exactly who all is represented in that task force, but some coordination does happen through that.
And at the COP, the next COP, is there something that has been envisaged to do on sustainability environment? I mean, it was cancelled, of course, last November, but it will be on this November, if I understood correctly, in The Hague.
There won't be anything on the agenda for discussion at this COP on the environment, unfortunately.
No.
No, they're trying to keep the agenda very, very minimal. Yeah.
Yeah, a virtual
Or a
COP is
side
pretty hard
event or
to do stuff.
something, or would there be possibilities to organize side events, or?
There could be, though I guess, you know, the folks who are really at the COP are
Yeah, not no.
folks and tobacco control technical folks.
Yeah.
So I suppose it could kind of help build awareness of the need for more action on this issue from within that community, but it doesn't necessarily, I think, help us achieve the objective of kind of connecting with these other groups.
Yeah. No, but internally maybe to raise awareness also internally within the tobacco control community.
Yeah, it could be an opportunity to share some of these arguments that we've been thinking up, in addition to a variety of other opportunities there. Unfortunately, we are just about at the end of our session, so I think we'll cap it there, but we have a fantastic whiteboard full of all kinds of ideas, starting with just getting a general understanding of, you know, what does sustainable agriculture look like? What do sustainable livelihoods look like? Really, definitely the opposite of tobacco production and consumption. Moving into a few examples that we thought of existing programs, and then getting into kind of the arguments and the strategy and how we can move forward from here. So I think we did a great effort, lots of interesting ideas, lots of potential avenues to explore in the future, and hopefully the start of further conversations, ideally also featuring a few folks from outside of tobacco control, and we'll need to think about ways to ourselves join those conversations and encourage folks to join ours. So before I provide a few more concluding kind of remarks, I would like to invite our visual harvester, Peter Yan, to share his graphic recording that he created based on the session. So he's been listening in, capturing all of our great ideas, and has been creating something like a visual record for us. So I'd like to invite him to share what he's created so far. don't know if we're able to make him a host so he can share his screen.
He can share his screen. So maybe Peter Jan, if you just unmute yourself and let us know everything is fine on your side.
Yes, I'm fine. I am going to share this with you right now.
Wonderful. Oh, wow.
That's nice.
That's
Yes,
fantastic.
I have taken some more notes that I'm going to make fit on there, but yes.
Great. Well, thank you so much for this beautiful visual representation of all these, key issues we've been talking about and how they all kind of connect together. So this will be something great to share, with our networks with the final version. I just want to close the session by thanking everyone for your attendance and your participation today. We came up with a lot of great ideas, and certainly we think tobacco control is an important part of sustainable development and connected to so many environmental concerns. And I think we can all leave today's session not only with a bit of a renewed understanding or maybe even a new understanding of some of these issues and shared concerns, but also a few steps forward. What are the kinds of arguments we can make? Where are the places we can make these arguments? How we can start connecting with folks and hopefully keep the discussion moving forward. So thanks again. With that, we will conclude our session. Thanks to participants. Thank you to Claire and Danielle for your presentations, and to Nicoletta for running the visual whiteboard. And of course, Peter Jan for this beautiful, beautiful visual representation. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks for
all.
everything.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Everyone.
Thank you.